Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier. Joined as always, my co-host Nick Filato. Today we're here coming to you after a little bit of a break. It's that time of the year, February. Nick was traveling, and now I'm about to be traveling. This is going to be the last podcast in the month of February that I will be using this microphone for. So I'll be on the road for the rest of the month at this point. First, a work conference that I'm going to starting tomorrow morning, and then a couple other things that and in a bachelor party weekend, which is unfortunately the same weekend as the combine, Nick. So I will be missing my first combine ever from just a watching standpoint. So I'll have to be catching up on the phone and through text from you. And then we'll do a recap episode probably that Monday when I get back.
Dan is absolutely devastated about missing the combine because he loves the underwear Olympics. He's a huge fan of them in underwear.
I'll be in the Dominican Republic on a golf course and an all-inclusive instead. So I think I'll be doing all right. But today's episode, since we haven't talked in a while, is going to be about the topic of conversation. And we're going to dive into every single aspect of it. We've touched on it a little bit earlier in an episode, but today we're going to touch on basically whatever you can think of when it comes to the idea of the Matthew Stafford trade rumor. Trade reports at this point, discussions between the Giants and the Rams with the potential of the Giants trading for Matthew Stafford. We'll talk about why the Rams would consider doing it. We'll talk about why the Giants will consider doing it. We'll talk about the compensation that Nick and I would be okay with trading for Stafford. We'll talk about the compensation we won't be okay with. We'll talk about the contract and what would come if they were to trade for Matthew Stafford. We'll talk about what that means for the third overall pick. We'll talk about if this is something the Giants should be doing in the first place and the kind of 30,000-foot view of all of it. Essentially, look, you're trading for a 37-year-old quarterback. What does that mean? Before we do that, we want to touch on why we're talking about this now. And why we're talking about this now is that things are starting to heat up a little bit. In the past, we mentioned on an episode, Nick, that this was something that Malik Neighbors tweeted about and talked about with the media at Super Bowl Row. Jermaine Illuminor tweeted about Stafford with a GOAT sign next to him, number 9 with the GOAT sign next to him. And it was generally just kind of, Nick, I think just a floated rumor almost. Weirdly enough, Ethan GSN, shout out Ethan, Gotham Sports Network, created this rumor almost in a sense during last midseason. Though now I wonder if he had someone in his ear, because we heard today, Nick, and one thing Nick and I did before this, shout out to Big Blue Interactive and BBI, Eric from BBI and John, who recorded a podcast. Their sources are telling them that Matthew Stafford and the Rams and the New York Giants are engaged in trade conversations as we speak. Now, their source also tells them, and this is the most interesting part of all of it, Nick, that these trade discussions didn't just start now. They started last season during the regular season, just before the trade deadline, just before the Rams defeated the Vikings. I think it was a Thursday night football game.
October 24th.
October 24th. That was way early in the season. And at that point, the Rams season turned. Now, before that, and at that point, the Giants were 2-4 at that point. Their season was not over. So it's very interesting to hear, to me, to start this conversation. That's where I want to go with. And we'll start by saying this. Look, you guys can take their sources for what it's worth. You don't have to buy into them. This is coming from Big Blue Interactive, Eric BBI. He said he has 4 sources who are reporting very similar things. We'll get into some of the detail on that. I actually had another person reach out to me and tell me this is real and there's actual trade discussions and that these also happen. This was before I heard this podcast, which I believe Eric and BBI dropped yesterday. Nick, we're recording this on a Sunday, but this is something I heard last week, midweek, that trade discussions between the Giants and the Rams happened last year during the trade deadline. So that's 2 instances of me hearing it. I also heard from that source that the Giants and Joe Schoen were, and look, Nick, I'll give you a little insight quickly. This made me happy to hear. I'll just be honest that the Giants were exploring quarterback earlier than we think. And according to that source, like the Giants were also taken aback by what happened with Tyrod Taylor. They felt like hoodwinked almost by his agent. They thought they were getting him back and they really weren't in the boat that we may have thought they were as painted on Hard Knocks, which was Joe Schoen saying, look, we'll get Daniel Jones a weapon and we'll justify that contract. I don't think it was actually that ever. And why would
Danny's got sauces?
Danny's got sauces, yes. And no, that's the first thing I want to talk to you about. Let's start there, Nick, and get your take on that. What do you make of the Giants at 2-4 discussing the opportunity and the possibility of trading for Stafford in season last year?
I make of it that the New York Giants, specifically Joe Schoen and Brian Dable to a certain degree, finally come to understand that their quarterback situation was going to hamstrung this entire 2024 season. And that could lead, depending on how the rest of the 2024 season spiraled out of control, to the loss of jobs for both of those, I would say, desperate people in charge at the New York Giants with Shane and Dable. So that's probably the first thing, I believe, when it comes to the acquisition of him. Look, you and I say all the time, you need to find a quarterback. You have to get a quarterback in a 2-4 season in a weak NFC with a team. Sean McVay, Brian Dable, they've done trades before. Remember, who did the Giants trade with when they traded up to get Jalen Hyatt? It was Sean McVay and the Rams. So there is a relationship there, which is a good thing to store in the back of your mind as we continue throughout this podcast and talk about how these two teams have been talking about this for a while. I personally am all about exploring that trade. It always comes down to compensation, how you're going to make it work. But yes, I want my general manager at least making that phone call and seeing if it's feasible at that point of the season.
It's really interesting to me, Nick, just because at that point in the season, again, the Giants were 2-4, not by any means out of the playoffs, and they had really close losses against teams that, you know, if the reality is, we broke it down on tape. You don't have to agree with us. The tape tells its story, and we made our case. You can have your own case, but the reality is they could have won almost, if not all of those games with better quarterback play. The Dallas Cowboys game, the Giants figured it out. Brian Dable had a really good game plan against their defensive coordinator, Mike Zimmer. There were open shots on the field, and they were some of the worst attempts at deep passes you'll basically ever see. The one that was completed held back a touchdown to Malik Neighbors. The others were overthrows, were misses, were short, and these are 40-plus touchdown plays. They decided that Dallas game. The Cincinnati game, all you needed was one throw the entire game to win that game. One big play, the Wan'Dale Robinson miss, or just about anything that happened in the second half when the Cincinnati Bengals played 11 men around the line of scrimmage. That's 2 games right there. The Washington game, both Washington games, potentially 4 games right there the Giants could have easily won. And we're already talking about a team that, you know, now has 7 wins. Now you talk about the Saints game late in the season, right? Games like that the Giants ended up losing, Nick. Do the Giants win any of those games? Is it possible? The Dallas game late in the year, you know, middle of the year. So we're talking about all of these games, and that's the type of team I think that we're talking about here, Nick. Like, we're talking about a team that could be maybe 9-10 wins, and that's what gets you to that point. Because I think back to that moment, Nick, and I'm thinking about what we saw on tape. What we saw on tape was right before the Andrew Thomas injury, right? We saw a team that was leading the NFL in sacks, winning a lot on defense with their defensive line, and a team that, if we look back at our notes, and we've never given anywhere close to the pass blocking grades on a 1 to 10 scale on film that we gave the Giants those first few weeks, 5, 6, whatever it was, until Andrew Thomas got hurt. We're talking about insanely high grades that would trump anything we've seen in the past, 2, 3, 4 seasons, especially on a game-to-game basis over a 4 or 5 game sample size of consistency like we saw from that Giants offensive line. So now you're talking about trenches that were being won with Malik Neighbors out there making plays. Who knows about the rest of those receivers because the quarterback play was so bad. And on the other side of the ball, things were still not great in the secondary. But would it have mattered? It didn't seem to matter in that Bengals game. It didn't matter at moments of that Dallas game and other moments. I mean, look, the CeeDee Lamb play was a big play, but Giants had some stops in that game as well, Nick. So in their mind, I think they really felt, and they still do feel, as Dable mentioned, that they are a quarterback away from competing. Now, some people disagree with that.
Yeah, I think they are a quarterback away. It's just how far is that competition going to take you? What are we competing for? If we're competing for a playoff berth, yes. I think if the Giants landed a Matthew Stafford type of quarterback and they stayed relatively healthy and you had Andrew Thomas there for at least 15 games in a season instead of having his seasons cut short, Illuminor, you can use him. If Evan Neal took us, you don't even need all these ifs. If you got Matt Stafford, this is a team that can compete for the playoffs. And then at that point, as any New York Giant fan knows, anything can happen. I'm not saying the Giants are going to make a run, or that's putting the cart before the horse, but let's take some baby steps here. Figuring out that quarterback position is something that the New York Giants have not been able to do since Eli Manning retired. The Daniel Jones fiasco, the Daniel Jones time, it was rough. He didn't have the best infrastructure. We got it. Check. That's over now. We're turning the page. Matt Stafford would allow the New York Giants to be a respectable team again.
Yeah, and I think about, once you get to the playoffs in the NFC, this is the conference to be in where you can make some magic. The Rams with Stafford this past year, Nick, were a play or two away from beating the Eagles. They came closest to beating the Super Bowl champions of any team. And they also dealt with everybody talks about this and it's true. And I think the big if is if Andrew Thomas stays healthy, Nick, because it did derail the entire line and it will again. Like you had to kick Illuminar over to left tackle, which is not good. So you're really losing you're losing two positions there almost. He was okay at left tackle. He wasn't what he was at right tackle. You're moving guys around. The Giants had 10 offensive linemen play last year. Guess who had 11? Matthew Stafford. I mean, Matthew Stafford lost Puka for parts of the year, the beginning part of the year, a long stretch. Lost Cooper Kupp for most of the year, and had 11 different offensive linemen play, and he still performed at an insanely high level and basically led his team to being as close to as anyone was to beating the Super Bowl champions. So that says a lot to me about what he's still capable of individually. And I went back, Nick. I went back and I looked at it. I had a lot of time this week. I didn't have time to do a cut up. I wanted to do it before my trip. It was going to take too long, but I have some clips cut up. And I watched Matthew Stafford this past season. And I was amazed, man, because I'll say this, all the things that we talk about on this podcast, dude, about what we're looking for a quarterback, and it starts with the processing and the anticipation. And then, me, especially, and you as well on this front, do you have the arm talent to stick a lot of those throws and make a lot of those throws? In reality, because I watched him and then I watched my cut up I did earlier to your Burrow and Herbert. He's playing at that level. He is playing at that level. He has all the tools. His mind works insanely fast, and he has the arm talent still to make all of those throws. He's exactly what I want in a quarterback. No, does he do what Lamar does as far as making insane plays off platform when they're dead? No, you don't have that aspect, and he doesn't run. There's aspects of his game he doesn't have, but we've never really talked about that for what we look for in a quarterback, Nick. We're excited about those types of players, and we would welcome one on the Giants, but we're looking for anticipation, processing, and arm talent to make the throws and stick it in those tight windows. And he's doing that, man. Like I watched the tape. He looked fucking awesome last year. So I understand the pie in the sky idea, Nick. I used to be this guy. Go back 10 years of my fandom, and I was the guy who said, you never make a trade like this for a 37-year-old quarterback. You don't even consider it because what's the best that can happen? A 9-10 win season. I believe Matthew Stafford, when he gets to the playoffs, offers you potential for more, and he's proven that with the Rams because he took them there not too far after they had to dump multiple first-round picks. Really, their cap situation was fucked when they traded for Stafford. He didn't have that much to work with on that roster. It was good draft picks that hit and him, really, and Cooper Kupp playing at a high level. But, I look at it and I'm like, well, the other side of it is everybody thinks there's this perfect way to build a roster right now for the Giants or for any team. And you know what that is, Nick. It's draft a quarterback. He's on the rookie contract. You spend on the rookie contract. You take it this way. He's young. You can develop him for 10 years. That's great. It's pie in the sky. But no one ever thinks about what if that quarterback that you draft ends up being the same ceiling that you prescribe to Matthew Stafford, which is really just 8, 9, 10 wins and not really a Jaden Daniels level. Now, was there possible there's a Jaden Daniels in this class? Hopefully. But I don't think we're going to find a Jaden Daniels in any or every class, Nick, every year. I think a lot of times we're going to find an 8, 9, 10, 11 win ceiling out of the quarterback class.
I agree. And with this move, if the Giants went about it, as Schefter has reported, and as I'm sure many people can conclude, the Giants are not giving away the 3rd overall pick for this. The 2nd round pick, probably. And now that's also basically a 1st round pick, and we can get into that in a little bit, but I don't know how much more than that. It might be 2 2s. It might be 2 2s and some give back. We'll get into that in a second, but I want to get to my point. And that's if you get Matt Stafford in here, you can spend a mid-round pick on a developmental quarterback, see if you can find another quarterback to bring into this building while you have these next 2 years of a still very much above average quarterback. I would say top 10 quarterback in the NFL talent in Matt Stafford with Malik Neighbors, with this young offensive line. And now you can spend that 3rd overall pick on whoever you want. Do you want Hunter? Do you want freaking Grant? Whatever you want to do. If Abdul Carter falls to you, and then you don't have to pick up the 5th-year option as the BBI guys were talking about for Kayvon Thibodeau. If you want to, it just opens up so many different options, and you have the most important position figured out that the Giants have desperately tried to find for quite some time now, for at least the next 2 seasons. This is worth the risk. I look at Matt Stafford's injury history. What is it? I think since 2019, he's only had 2 seasons that he has not dropped back to throw the football 350 times. So this last year, he played, I think 15 games, 16. No, I think he played all the games. He played all the games except for the one where Jimmy Garoppolo started at the end of the season. He had 628 dropbacks. 2023, he had 605 dropbacks. 2022, he had 338. So there you go. But then the one before that was when he won the Super Bowl at 793. Right. Before that, 583. So it's not as dire as I think some people make it, but I get it. 37 years, it's going to carry risk, but you got to freaking risk it for the biscuit, ladies and gentlemen. We can't be these just cowards. We can't just sit on our balls and just hope that this all figures itself out. This is at least an option that should significantly be pursued by this organization. This episode is brought to you by Skims. Get your hands on the best underwear in the land. Look, I'm sure, gentlemen, you're a lot like me. You don't want your fit to be too compact, nor do you want to be swinging around like you're trying to destroy a piñata. You want everything in place. Comfort on a cloud with no ride-up. That is the ideal situation, and Skims provides that situation for us, gentlemen. They sent me a few pairs. I wear them to work. I wear them while I'm working out, and they are exactly what I'm looking for in my underwear. And Christmas is right around the corner. So grab a pair of Skims for someone in your life. Maybe that someone is you, and you want that comfortable underwear for your whole situation down there. So shop Skims Men's at skims.com. That's skims.com. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show, Big Blue Banter, in the drop-down menu that follows. And if you're looking for the perfect gifts for the whole family, Skims just launched their biggest holiday shop ever. So visit skims.com to check that out and maximize your draw's comfortability. Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by Manscaped, the global leader in men's lifestyle and grooming. Every man knows the unbeatable feeling of a fresh barbershop shave. Now, what if I told you that you no longer have to wait weeks or even months between appointments to experience it? Introducing Manscaped's newest innovation, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver, the game-changing tool that brings the luxury of professional shave right into your home. Whether you're after that daily silky smooth finish or prefer to maintain a rugged 5 o'clock shadow, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver is your go-to for precision and style every time. Head over to manscaped.com and join the over 11 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using code BIGBLUE for 20% off. Gentlemen, this has changed the grooming game for me, and I highly recommend it for you. Get the Chairman Pro today and experience a shave that is as smooth as you deserve. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com.
Now the compensation part, because I think, when you first asked about why would this ever happen, Nick, and the reason why it might ever happen is because of money and because of the relationship souring to some extent. We know the Rams weren't happy with Matthew Stafford last offseason and how long it took for them to kind of get on the same page of the contract, and that's been toiling away. They haven't come to any kind of agreement, and the Giants would be a team that would be offering him what he wants from a financial standpoint and what she wants, his wife, Kelly Stafford, wants from a financial standpoint. Also, she has her own podcast now. They've been offering her that market. This is something the BBI guys mentioned, and I was like, good point. But that's very low on the list. I think really it comes down to they'd be offering him that guaranteed money over a 2-year contract. The numbers have been floated, and this is coming from that BBI source, has been, 2 years at $55 million each guaranteed money. That's not something the Rams may be offering right now. But the way I look at it, Nick, as far as that goes, the financial burden of it, that's the part I'm least worried about, Nick. I don't give a flying F about the cap anymore. I really don't. The Eagles have so many freaking contracts under the books. The Giants don't have any contracts. We don't have to worry about the cap. Everyone wants to get cap healthy. Never really comes to mind thinking about, okay, great, we're cap healthy now, but what the hell do we do with it? Because it's been proven over history that free agency isn't a good place to go with it. So why the hell do we keep needing all this space when you can't really use it in free agency, or you can, but it doesn't really work out well? It's really just for re-signing great players and great draft picks, right, Nick? Well, the Giants are in a unique position, to be quite honest with you, where they need to draft the guys to be able to re-sign. And by the time they need to re-sign those guys, Nick, and we're sure as hell hoping that this past class, the 2024 class, is a start of that. Guys are going to want to re-sign. But by that time they need to re-sign those guys, that 2-year contract for Stafford, it's all well and done at that point. And that money is off the book. So this is really meaningless in my mind from a financial standpoint. I would do whatever. I would not worry at all personally as a fan from a financial standpoint. Now, the other side of it, which is a big worry to me, is the compensation side. And I want to make that point to you because of what you said with Joe Shane. And it's the shopping hungry. Is it reeking of desperation? Well, what I would really hope in this scenario is that he plays the market. It's something we didn't see him do with Daniel Jones. It's the biggest mistake in his tenure. It's not re-signing Jones. It's not what his biggest mistake was not re-signing Jones. His biggest mistake was not letting Jones hit the free market. So you could see if any NFL team really thought that way of Jones. And the reality is they most likely wouldn't have. No one will know that for sure, but everything that we know suggests that. So that was his biggest mistake to me. You let Jones hit the market, you tag Barkley, Jones comes back to you, his agent, he can make up some bullshit numbers from some team. It's not the reality of what's going to happen. I think they would ultimately ended up on some 2-year deal in the first Baker contract range. I know that was a small deal, but a small deal, nowhere near what he got. Yeah. But that shows to me that Joe Schoen kind of got hoodwinked by the agent a little bit there. Now, was Mara's involvement involved? I don't know. But I look around the league, Nick, and I want to go over this exercise with you. Leverage is key in trade conversations. Outside of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I looked up all 32 teams. What team is in position to trade for Matthew Stafford right now? You could think a team, the closest thing I found was the Seahawks. But there is no chance in hell the Rams and Seahawks are making a trade for Matthew Stafford in division. You can rule them out. The Miami Dolphins just paid Tua. The Jets, they're rebuilding. They're going young. They don't have the cap space. They blew too much on Rodgers. The Patriots, no. The Bills, no. And that's, in that division. Don't go through the NFC West. Everyone in the NFC South is not trading for a quarterback, with the exception of the Saints, who may do it, but they're in cap hell as well. Unlikely. No one in the NFC North. No one else in the NFC East. No one in the AFC North, besides the Browns, have even a chance to, and the Browns are also in that F Saints position from a cap standpoint. The Giants have gotten themselves cap healthy for this reason. And by the way, when I said AFC North, Nick, I meant with the exception of the Steelers. That's the prime team. Now you go to the other division, the South, the AFC South, the Titans. Let's put them in the mix. That's a realistic one. And the last one, you go to the West, it's really just the Raiders. Now, the Raiders, the Titans, the Steelers, and the Giants, those are the teams that I think could realistically make a trade for Matthew Stafford, both from a cap standpoint and from where they are at with their rebuilds at quarterback. Maybe the Colts, that's a wild card I could throw in there if they're done with Richardson and we don't know about it, but let's not put them in for now. Out of those 4 teams, it doesn't surprise me that I heard a report from Albert Breer this weekend that Matthew Stafford would be okay with the Giants, because besides the Steelers, there's not like these glaring options right now.
As the BBI guys brought up, and as you mentioned a little bit earlier, Kelly Stafford has a successful podcast, and I know you can have a podcast anywhere in the country, as we found out on this podcast when I was moving around everywhere.
Yeah.
But the New York market offers a ton. The New York market offers a lot, being the starting quarterback for the New York Football Giants. We have Malik Neighbors, as we mentioned, talking about this. I think Matt Stafford wants a star receiver. He's been throwing to 2-star receivers. And if this happens and Matt Stafford ends up a New York Giant, we trade and we get him, Cooper Kupp is more than likely going to come along. So you're going to have, as Malik Neighbors talked about on Celebrity Row, I want to learn from Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp's one of the best route runners. I want to pick his brain. So you have this young, budding wide receiver in Malik Neighbors already putting this out into the ether and praising a guy like Cooper Kupp for his ability to run routes. And I think Malik also brought up how he wants to be using the slot and how Cooper Kupp is. So there are a lot of little seeds to suggest that this thing has real legs beyond all the reports from BBI, beyond everything else that we're saying, just from the New York Giants. I think Jermaine Illuminor tweeted something like, you might have mentioned that a little bit earlier about Stafford. So all this put together, man, it's really going to come down to the compensation package.
Yes.
And if it is the 2-2s, because some of these other teams are poking around, which basically is a 1 and a 2 because it's a 34th overall pick, and then next year's 2. Would you say yes? And is that your cap? Is that the most you would give? Or would you want something back in return?
I would say no to a deal like that. Okay. And I would think that Shane got hoodwinked in a deal like that, because like I said, I don't think any other team but the Steelers are really in the mix for them. Now, we've heard that teams are poking around. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's not. If some of those teams are the Raiders or whatever, it's like, what? I mean, maybe there's a surprise team I'm not thinking of. But as I work through every team, man, there are teams with like Penix. They're not going for a quarterback, right? Bone. Any of the guys who drafted a quarterback last year are not going for quarterbacks, right? A lot of these other teams, too, are just not in position to draft for a quarterback. And then I'm ruling out the entire NFC West, because you could consider maybe Arizona, stuff like that. So they're not trading in division there.
What about the Saints?
Who?
The Saints.
Yeah, the Saints is a team like that I mentioned, but they're in such a cap hell that like why it's so unlikely that they could make that work from a cap standpoint.
But even if those teams that you did mention, let's go through them real quick, right? I'm going to take the Vikings out because I know people floated that around. Like, they got JJ. They could franchise tag Sam. Like, I'm taking the Vikings.
That one I'm a little worried. That one would be
that would be the one that would worry me the most. I guess I shouldn't remove it because obviously Justin Jefferson, but all those other teams that we're mentioning, even a team like Pittsburgh has that defense that you can rely on. But you look at the Giants right now, and when you have Malik, like people want to play with
Right.
this kid. There is so much respect for a guy like Malik Neighbors, and it does seem like people do respect Brian Dable's ability to at least coach offense. So I look at those other teams outside of Minnesota, including Pittsburgh, Tennessee Titans, the Raiders, teams like this. The Giants actually may offer Matt Stafford exactly what he wants relative to those other teams.
Correct. But and that's why I think they should use that leverage, that natural leverage they have, however little it may be, to their advantage in these trade talks, because you can't just be the team that screws themselves over by just getting hoodwinked by in a trade discussion. Like Matt Stafford's 37 years old. Matt Ryan at 37 years old was traded for a third round pick. He's in a better position standing than Ryan was at the time. Fine. Aaron Rodgers, who was not considered until this past, year to be on the downside of his career. A lot of people were just saying, yes, he was 39 at the time the Jets traded for him from the backers, but he was not considered done by any means. And I think you can compare their situations very similarly. That was a trade swap in round one, which you can basically rule out. It went from 13 to 15. The Jets went from 13 to 15 to the Steelers. That's meaningless, really. And I believe 2 threes it was there, or 2 threes, and they got back a 4 or a 2 and a 3. So to me, it's like 2 twos is completely out of the question. I actually personally don't even think they should offer this year's 2. I think they should offer this year's 3 and a conditional next year that can rise to a 2, depending on how many games the Giants win. And I think that's about what the compensation should be for the position the Rams are in, which is one, there's some friction that we've now seen take place over the last 15 months with Stafford. And it's reported in the media last year. This happened in training camp. 2, it's the friction that, his wife airing some grievances, right? They already put Cooper Kupp on the trade block. That's not something they're happy about. 3, it's do the Rams want to extend that money that Stafford wants? Because this is the root of why this is even a possibility that they're trading him, Nick. It's that the contract situation. He wants a lot of money guaranteed for the last couple of years of his career, as he should, right? And the Rams maybe don't want to give him that for whatever reason, or that maybe there's friction beyond what we know within that relationship, and it's more fractured than we know. We won't know that. But the point being, they don't have the leverage they should, it seems like they have in this situation. The Giants need to recognize that. Now, if the Steelers come in and they make a big offer, the Vikings come in and they make a big offer, then maybe you lose some leverage, because both those teams have, one has a good defense, like you mentioned with the Steelers, a winning culture, and the Vikings just, you could literally, that's probably Stafford's number one place he would want to go for insane multitude of reasons. Kevin O'Connell, the coach, and just the team. But if those teams aren't calling, or the Steelers aren't serious, and the Vikings aren't even considering it because of J.J. McCarthy, which we very well might see happen this offseason, we don't know where their mind's at. The Giants then have a lot of leverage, and it becomes almost a situation where it's like, we're the Rams, we're not going to get this contract done. It's almost like a free agent at that point, or it should be at least viewed that way from Shane. So for me, I am not considering this year's 2. Personally, I take it off the table. It's not of interest to me. But I will say this, man, when you watch him on tape, he's still so much better. Honestly, dude, a case can be made he's better than anything the Giants have essentially ever had at the quarterback position. And yes, I'm including Eli Manning in that. Yes, we love Eli Manning. We're homers, we're fans. We look at it in blue roses. But when you watch the tape of this kid, he's everything Manning was from a processing.
He's older than you.
Man. He's everything Manning was from a processing standpoint, Nick, if not more. And his arm talent is considerably better. And it still is at the point where it was. And then I just look at the fact that he took this team this year with 11 different offensive linemen and injuries to his 2 best receivers for most of the year to almost challenge, giving the Eagles the best challenge. So I just look at it like, old me, I would never consider this at this stage, right? The Giants are coming off a bad season. Why would you trade for a 37-year-old? New me, Nick, is like, if we don't get this quarterback situation right in the next 2 to 3 years, we're wasting Malik Neighbors and he's done with us. We're wasting blah, 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 and he's done, Dexter, and he's done with us. Every single piece becomes a waste, and we're just toiling away. And I'm not so sure that Cam Ward's going to do it, or Shedeur Sanders, or whoever it may be.
That's the point right there. It's what are your other options? And no, we do not want to shop hungry, but if this was a Drake May, Jaden Daniels type of draft class, which it does not appear to be, still got to get the eyes on the film, then we're having a completely different conversation. But we're talking about top 10 quarterback who, yes, is 37 years old, who might have a sour relationship with his current team and could be had for day 2 picks in a situation where you've been desperately trying to solve this quarterback situation, and you're the laughing stock of the league, and the team that you despise just won a Super Bowl with the former face of your, like, the Giants are down right now. They need to get a little bold. They need to make some decisions to try to turn this thing around. And I'm not certain, especially now that they have the 3rd overall pick and they don't control their destiny with the 1st overall pick, which is another thing. If they don't love Ward or Shedeur, if they don't think Ward's going to be there, whatever it is, what are we looking at? Getting Jackson Dart? Like, do you love that as an option? You could still do that at 34 if you retain that pick and get Matt Stafford, right? But you have these next 2 years covered, which Joe Shane and Brian Dable want at the quarterback position. And then you can take some time to develop someone young or find another way to get someone behind Matt Stafford who could be your quarterback of the future. It buys you years while staying competent at the most important position in the entire sport.
At minimum, it's competent. At maximum, and it's amazing because I do still think Stafford can do it. He almost did it this year against the Eagles at the end. And at baseline, it's still top 10 quarterback play. What he delivered last year, dude, if you really look at it, he was probably the best quarterback in the NFC. You could say Jaden Daniels was, and that's fine. And I'm okay with that. And moving forward, I would take Jaden over him, obviously. But according to what they put on tape last year, just from what I just started watching, man, I mean, like with everything that went around, like Jaden didn't have all those issues around him, his O-line breaking down and his receivers both injured. And he had a brand new system no one's seen, and no one had seen him in the NFL. People have all the tape they need on Stafford. But you know why he's still winning, Nick, when he has all those injuries on the O-line and the receivers that he doesn't have rapport with or going out there? Jordan Whittington, he's making he's hitting Tutu Atwell, whole shots to Tutu Atwell. Because he processes at an insanely high level, higher than anyone in the NFC right now, I would argue. Literally, he's the highest level processor in the NFC. And his arm talent is literally, in my mind at least, again, the best in the NFC. That's the argument I would make. You're getting a quarterback with the best processing skills and the most experience pre and post snap processing and the best arm talent in the NFC. Now, you can make the case Caleb Williams could be up there for arm talent. I would listen to that. Outside of him, I'm not sure I'd entertain anyone else having better arm talent in the NFC than Matthew Stafford right now.
And this trade is, if it does happen, it can't happen until what is it? The start of the new league year.
Start of the new league year, March. So we won't hear about it for
March 12th. He's due, Matt Stafford, that is a $4 million roster bonus on March 19th. So this trade is going to happen in that window, and we might hear some things if it happens, of course. The fact that this trade was being discussed mid-season last year, which I'm not sure, has that been verified, or is that
per these BBI sources?
These are the BBI sources. Okay. If that is true though, like, that there was friction at that point with the Rams, and maybe that did stem from the Matt Stafford taking a while last year to come back to the Rams
and not getting what he wanted ultimately, by the way, Nick.
Yeah. And not getting what he wanted exactly. And then the Cooper Kupp stuff, which Kelly came out and talked about on the podcast, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot there from that standpoint. It could behoove the Rams, Les Snead and Sean McVay to do this. Again, though, man, like the compensation you said, yeah, of course, I'd be like, that's awesome. But like, I could see this being like a butting ahead and them getting more teams involved in this conversation. Because again, we're talking about a top 10 quarterback here. So even teams that we might not look at and be like, they have the quarterbacks. Do they? Like if financially they could swing it somehow, would they want to do this? Because they believe their window is right now. So there could be some surprise teams that squeak in there somehow.
Who would you consider those teams to be?
I don't know right now. Yeah. That's the thing. There isn't.
They just paid Dak.
I would have said Dallas if it wasn't for them paying Dak, but paying Dak, they're completely out of it.
They just paid Love. They're out of it. Any of these teams that just paid are out of it. And teams
Miami paid Tua, out of it. So I'm looking. You can't swing it with Cleveland, right?
Nope.
You can't swing
Saints
it.
Don't have the cap for it either.
Saints probably don't have the cap for it. Seattle's in division.
Right.
Arizona's in division.
Right.
So
it's
really
not many teams. The Jets aren't going in that direction. There's not many.
Minnesota is the scariest. Pittsburgh is the second scariest. I could see either of those two teams. And then what were the other two? The Raiders and
sell them on Vegas, I guess, but there's nothing there to work with. You got Bowers, but there's not much to work with there, really at all.
I think the Colts are another one though, man, that could be sneaky.
If they've given up on Richardson, yes.
Which they kind of did last year, and then they're like, "Oh, you know what? You're better than Flacco. Let's put you back there."
They also did this already with Matt Ryan, and it didn't work out. So I'm not so sure they'd pull that trigger again, too.
Yeah, it's true, but I mean,
they have to.
You got to look at it. You got to look at it in a vacuum, though. And as you said before, like Matt Ryan was over the hill at that point. Stafford just came off an excellent season. Where
logically, I think you're right. I just don't know if they would be viewing it as they're a little shell shocked from just making a similar type move. So these are all things I just want Joe Shane to really strongly consider, Nick, because
I like it.
I need him to understand the leverage and not get blown out in this trade offer. Obviously, 3 is off the table, but I don't even really think he needs to put 2 on the table. But let's say they do, and let's say they ultimately make a trade. The compensation doesn't involve a first round pick, but it's multiple 2s or a 2 and a 3. This good 2 this year, and then next year's 3 with a, they could also put in one of those trades like the
They get a
Jets had.
5 back or something like that.
Yeah, they get back a 5.
Yeah.
The Giants, there's some compensation, if the Giants make it to the NFC Championship game, they give back. It turns into a second pick, right? Or, the Giants could consider, if Kupp is part of the deal, throwing in Wan'Dale Robinson on a cheap contract, right? At that point, he becomes very expendable for the Giants if they trade for Cooper Kupp. We already want Neighbors to get more snaps in the slot. Now Kupp is also in the slot. What the hell are they going to do with a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson? You throw him in a trade, right? And something that Rams might find valuable. Maybe not. Jalen Hyatt, maybe they find him valuable. You little pieces like this could be in the mix as well. But point being, Nick, if they do make this trade, the Giants, they have so many more options and they have to shop so much less hungry once they get to that draft, right? Like, first of all, you have the option of this, Nick, which you make the trade for Stafford, right? You give him the money he wants, which means nothing to us because we're cap healthy now and we need a quarterback anyway and we want to spend there. And then you trade down from 3. What about that option? You trade down from 3 and you accrue back all the picks and capital you just lost on Stafford. You don't get the blue chip at 3 that you would get, but you get an insane defensive lineman at 9 or 10 or whatever it may be. If you trade with the Raiders so they can get Shador, or the Jets who are interested in Shador, apparently you trade with them, something like that. Now you're picking back up all the capital you just traded for Stafford. And essentially, you're not getting the same blue chip you're going to get at 3, Hunter, Abdul Carter, or Mason Graham, or whatever it may be. And you're not going to take your chance on a quarterback and have him groomed behind Stafford at that point. But you are also getting back all your capital and still getting probably a blue chip player. Or you sit at 3 and you say, holy shit, I can get Travis Hunter on my roster. And now you just have Travis Hunter on your roster that you wouldn't have because you're going to take a quarterback otherwise. So, or Abdul Carter, whatever it may be. It's very appetizing, and it changes their whole roster construction. And instead of it like being a situation where they're forcing the quarterback, they're more so letting the quarterback come to them, because Stafford will give you 2 years and then you restart your search for a quarterback. But at least you had a quarterback in that span. Drafting Ward, Sanders, or any of these guys, it's no guarantee you're going to have a quarterback in that 2-year span where now Malik Neighbors is in year 2 and now Malik Neighbors is in year 3. Does he want to leave the Giants? Are you wasting this talent? Are you wasting Hyatt? Was there anything there to be had? Is Wan'Dale something we didn't know about because he was so held back? Is Theo Johnson something we don't know about? Is he being wasted? Tyrone Tracy, can you make this crazy impact in the passing game we haven't seen yet? Or even just, be a bigger part of the offense when the passing game is actually moving? All these pieces get wasted if you don't find quarterback play. We just wasted them this year. We've been wasting them for years of wasting our skill talent. And there's no guarantee that won't continue to be wasted. It's more than likely not when we don't do this trade, or if we don't do this trade and he ends up re-signing with the Rams and he used this all as leverage to get a better contract, which may end up being the case with Los Angeles. We may draft someone or not, and he may or may not be the guy. So there are so many variables in that, with a lot of them leading toward more wasted assets and more bad passing game from the Giants.
And look, I have to imagine, John Mara does not want to be this embarrassing again. Like, the ownership does not want this embarrassment again. And one way to just quickly change it around is to get that proven guy in the building. And that's like I think that would be their course of action if it doesn't cripple them. It just comes down to the compensation, as we said, because even with Stafford's contract, he has, I think, 2 years left on his contract. If this trade were to go down, the Giants are probably going to rip that contract up, throw it out, and then give him a 3-year deal, with a 2-year out,
I saw
guaranteed. And it's going to be a lot of guaranteed money. And that's what it's going to be. So that's more than likely what would happen. So the contractual situation that people are talking about right now, based on his current contract, it's almost like I don't even really pay attention to that too much, because the Giants would do something else with him. They would extend him and they would give him a lot of guaranteed money.
Oh, yeah, that's it. It would be big. And again, I personally, on that side of it, others can worry about the cap health. I will not worry about it anymore. Giants are not in a position where I need to worry about their cap health right now. They don't have enough young players that need to be re-signed. Right now, they need to. No, it's true, though. And yet, despite that, Nick, before that Andrew Thomas injury, they looked like a team that was doing everything right besides the quarterback play, if we're being honest from a film standpoint. Not everything. The corners were still bad, the secondary, but enough. And they were in games, and they led the NFL in sacks, and we gave them insanely high grades in pass protection. Like, their offensive line was allowing them to do anything they wanted on offense. Neighbors was wide open all game, and just, the quarterback couldn't get him the ball at an insane rate. So it just feels like I don't hate the take from Dable and Shane that they're not as far away as the fans think from that standpoint. And I'm not saying that the fans are wrong who are so negative about it, because you can look at the roster, dude, and you could say so much is wrong with this roster. But I think ultimately in football, it's a little overrated when we nitpick, like, is cornerback 2 great? Is safety 1 amazing? Where are we at on wide receiver 4? When the reality is most of this game is won offensive line, defensive line, and quarterback. Most of it. That's 97% of the game to me.
If you could figure out offensive and defensive line and the quarterback, yes, obviously you want Ty Law, you want
Right.
Patrick Surtain, but if you have Fabian Moreau out there, you can get by.
We've seen
You can
it.
get by
And
with Sam Madison. You'll be
yeah,
fine.
and we've seen Eli get to levels where you can, survive with not so great guys at tight end, Larry Donnell, wide receiver, things like that. Or even like I just mentioned this year with Stafford, when he had Cup and when he had Puka go down, Jordan Whittington and Tutu Atwell and Demarcus Robinson are putting up numbers for him, right? And we've seen this from Mahomes throughout the years as well. These high processing quarterbacks who throw with anticipation consistently, can read defenses pre to post snap, can manipulate them with their eyes and throw the other way, which Stafford does an amazing job of, understanding where everything is on every play, the backside and the front side of a play. It becomes less important for the receivers to be big names, and it becomes more important for the receivers to be on time with the routes so they can get there when the ball gets there. And a lot of guys can do that. You're a professional receiver for a reason. You made it to the NFL. And on the flip side of the ball, the corners aren't great. The safeties, they're developing. They're not amazing, and linebackers, whatever. But a lot of times it doesn't matter if the D-line takes over. We saw that with the Eagles in the Super Bowl. This is a countless trope that we've seen with the Giants throughout their years in their Super Bowls. In the end, you're not as far away if you can get your line play right and your quarterback play right as everyone thinks you are by just manipulate. If you nitpick a roster, yes, it could look bad on paper. You don't have cornerback 1, but again, like, these things are not playing the role that people think they are in winning and losing games. It's not about just on paper getting your roster right. It's about how do you win games. And the reality is there's an overabundance of importance on the trenches and the quarterback play. It means a lot more than, filling out the roster.
Couldn't have said it better myself, man. It's exciting at least to have this conversation looming. Again, there's a lot of aspects of it that I'm a little worried about, but I'm certainly on board though in entertaining this, because you're desperate. We are desperate, and I don't like shopping desperate, but this is a path to, again, I've used this before, but this is a path to at least not be a complete dumpster fire, tire fire, laughing stock of the NFL. Since Eli Manning left, right? Was that 2019? Retired after since 2019, the New York Giants, they have not had a quarterback. They just haven't. All right. Daniel Jones was fine. This is a path to getting back into watching film of. Imagine watching film of Matt Stafford, dude. Every game. What that could do to the offense, what that could do for a guy like Malik Neighbors, what that could do for the tight ends, what that could do for the rushing game. Just thinking it from that standpoint, selfishly, makes me very excited. But again, there's a lot of drawbacks here too. He's freaking 37 years old and he has had some back issues.
And if it gets closer, Nick, to this becoming a reality and the Giants are getting heated conversations of getting close to a deal being done, I think you're going to do, I know you're going to do what I just did, and you're going to do it extensively, and I'm going to get back into it. You're going to watch the tape of Stafford this year. I did 2023, 2024, and I sorted by in average depth of target down. So I watched every single throw from average depth of target down. That's how I like to scout these quarterbacks, because, it's what they want. It's the difficult throws that they make. And you'll see what I saw, man. This film is phenomenal. This guy is still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL by far, really. In the NFC, it's by far, independent of his situation, as we always like to say. And that's a player that would then be on the Giants. And yes, we'd be watching his tape, but to me, more importantly, for the future of our franchise, Nick, he'd be developing Neighbors. We wouldn't be wasting Neighbors. We would at least know what Jalen Hyatt is, right? Because if Tutu Atwell and Demarcus Robinson can do things on the vertical plane like they have with Stafford and the Rams, I sure as hell still believe that Jalen Hyatt, who did it with Hendon Hooker, can do it with Matthew Stafford. I really am just going to say that right now. And Wan'Dale Robinson, I've already seen the tape at Kentucky. He has a vertical element to his game that hasn't been unlocked because of our quarterback play and our offensive line play. Theo Johnson, I'd love to see him. Seeing what he's done with Higbee, Stafford, who's not even, I think Theo has more upside than him from an athletic standpoint and just a talent standpoint. I'd love to see that. Would love to see him, how he utilizes that type of player. Even Daniel Bellinger, a player who we like a lot, I think can become like a nice, because the Rams have a lot of times gotten a lot of production out of their tight end twos in the offense. I think that's something that comes into play as well. And then whoever else we draft, right?
And that's another aspect of this too, man. When it comes to just how the Rams operated their offense, this is going to be a different offense. Like Sean McVay is,
Yes.
wide zone, stretch zone, but Stafford was able to operate his bootleg action game, which he ran all the time, and that's a big part of what Brian Dable wanted to do with Daniel Jones. And I still think it would be a big enough part because yes, he's not the most mobile guy. He's 37 years old and he was never really the fastest to begin with, but he knows how to operate the pocket and he is mobile enough to be able to successfully throw the football on the run off those play action naked bootlegs. So that can still be an aspect and a part of this offense. I would say he's more mobile than Goff, and he's 37. And Goff is, I'm not sure how old Goff is. He's a little bit younger than that. So he's not necessarily a statue. It's just not, I'm going to design a game plan to focus Matt Stafford as a runner. It's just that's going to be removed from your offense. But Dable can still operate what he wants to do from a drop back and move the pocket framework and still successfully attack down the field and use the play action, marry that to play action passing attack to the passing attack itself with the rushing attack. And I think the offense could still be deceptive just like it was with the Rams, albeit different.
I love that you said that because I saw multiple examples. That one against the Lions, I have in my notes, and I'm looking at it right now, of Stafford being forced out of the pocket, a couple where he is rolling to his opposite shoulder, and he still made the play. He flipped his hips around and ripped the ball downfield. That part of it's easy for him, throwing the football. It is easy. He is one of the best throwers of the football still in the NFL to this day. Now, what I'll bring up now, Nick, is if they don't make this trade for Stafford, let's say the Rams, they're using, or Stafford's camp is using the Giants and these rumors as leverage and the talks as leverage for the Rams to come to a bigger contract. Now, I don't know if that's the case. Who knows what's going on with the situation? Say he resigns. Malik Neighbors has already said this offseason he thinks the Giants should take a veteran quarterback, sign a veteran quarterback, and draft a quarterback, right? So the rookie doesn't have to have it all on his plate and on his shoulders. We heard Joe Shane mention there's a possibility they'll trade for a quarterback, but they have to get a veteran quarterback this offseason. It's a must. There are other routes the Giants can go, Nick, that don't involve trade compensation to get a veteran quarterback. Stafford, that's a route that involves trade compensation. Other routes don't involve the trade compensation. Those are the routes that I'm also curious about if the Giants should rather explore. So those would be someone like Russell Wilson, right? The controversial one that I personally would prefer, like even over Stafford, if I'm going to be honest with you, because you don't have to trade anything, Aaron Rodgers is a very controversial one. I posted about this twice on Twitter, Nick. Both times, a lot of hate replies. A lot of people have no interest in Rodgers. I don't know what happened with him in the Jets last year off the field. I think we all have our opinions based on what we read, which seems like it could be bullshit to some extent, at least. I'm sure things weren't great, but is this just definitely a broken guy who can't be good in any locker room? Because if not, he's going to give the Giants a lot of what Stafford can give them right now, just minus the trade compensation.
Minus the trade compensation, he's still, from everything I've seen of Aaron Rodgers, he still throws a beautiful football. He's less mobile than Matt Stafford. That was purely evident on tape. His mobility is significantly compromised, but some of those throws he was making to Devontae and Garrett this year, it was significant. Now, I don't know how the players in the Jets locker room feel or have felt about Aaron Rodgers. It does seem like in his past with the Packers and early on with the Jets, the players loved him. Now, I don't know what's going on with the Garrett Wilson thing. I'm not sure if that's a thing against Aaron Rodgers. I know Garrett Wilson wanted to trade, or is that an organizational thing? Look, there's no way for me to read into that, but I haven't heard many players come out and say, hey, I hate Aaron Rodgers, right? I think there was one, and I don't want to, one of the receivers from the past maybe had some bad thing to say, one of those Packers guys. I don't want to say who because I'm not 100% sure, but overall, it seems like he's pretty revered. And that's what I care about more than what the media is saying about him.
I agree. And I think that's something I guess the Giants will have to explore, Nick. But out of all the options free agency-wise, he's the best by far. Though Russell Wilson's numbers in the deep passing game were phenomenal this past year.
They were great, bro.
They were the number one in the league by far on every metric. But that would be good for Neighbors and people and maybe Hyatt on the deep lane. But they're still
Everything
taking
outside the numbers.
That's
Everything
the
outside
thing.
the
Everything
numbers.
is then
Yeah.
outside the numbers, and we're
Yeah.
losing that middle of the field passing game. It feels very limited. I'm not loving that idea for development. And as far as Rodgers goes, I do want to make it clear. I think you're 100% right. The mobility is less. He's actually not bad moving vertically, just laterally. He's lost some mobility. I wonder if that'll improve 1 year for proof from the Achilles or if he's just too old.
Yeah, that's true.
The other thing I want to make clear, though, just from watching enough tape of Stafford and Rodgers through the years, I think that at this stage of their career, and I actually think this started before Rodgers was traded to the Jets, and we can look back at our film review of the Giants versus Packers in London for confirmation of this, by the way, and the games that preceded it that I watched leading up to that game. I think that Stafford is a considerably better post-snap processor than Aaron Rodgers at this point in their career. I think he sees the field much better than Rodgers does currently. And part of that is because I just think Stafford sees the field better than almost anyone I watch on tape. I really believe that. He's at that
Who's in the
Burrow.
conversation? Yeah, it's like
To me,
Burrow.
it's Burrow, Herbert, who I thought when I broke down his tape, my
Yeah,
God.
you said that. Yeah.
I mean,
I
you
haven't
can
watched it
see
yet.
it, dude. Like, he finds backside better than any quarterback in the NFL. And that, to me, is a sign of a good processor.
Yeah.
The backside of plays, I mean. So I think it's those
Like,
guys.
especially on unbalanced 3x1 sets, right? You look to the play
Yeah.
side, you see everything going on. You're like, all right, let me get to my
I
backside.
love that,
It shows the
dude.
patience. It shows the poise. You understand what those safeties are doing. And then the middle of the field is wide open. You hit it in time.
Right.
Still within the timing of the play in rhythm. Yeah, it's beautiful, dude.
And you
Not
would see a lot
quarterbacks
of
do
those
that.
this year, by the way, from LA with the backside dig. But you'd also see they thought he was so good at understanding. And I heard Jim Harbaugh talk about this, the way that he drops. It's part of his drop. He has his body tilted in a direction that has him 75% of the field in his vision, and he just understands what's on the backside of that 25%.
Yeah.
Herbert, so he doesn't need to look there. They would bake it into their offense. They had guys just running the rail on the other side. So he would just hit Quinston Johnson on the rail. And it's just like, wow, wide open, it looks like. But it's really just like, this was just like a defense is going to give them that space because no quarterback usually can flip his hips from that position and rip a ball to that spot. But Herbert can do that. And those are things Stafford can do, by the way.
Yes.
Very similar quarterbacks from that standpoint. So I do think, like, yes, the idea of a Rodgers or a Russell, it's interesting. You don't have to give up trade compensation, but you're not getting the same kind of caliber of quarterback by any freaking means. I really do honestly believe like Stafford played the position from a processing and arm talent standpoint better than almost anyone in the NFC, if not anyone in the NFC, you guys. So you have to put Jaden Daniels there if you want to. It's a different offense, entirely different offense in his first year playing in the NFL. And I know he'd bring that to the Giants. I just know he would. For Neighbors, it would be phenomenal. Honestly, for Hyatt, it would be phenomenal. Tutu Atwell, to Marcus Robinson. Look at all the guys on the deep plane who have worked with Stafford. I'm sure Hyatt can work if those guys can work. Wan'Dale Robinson, I can even see if they don't trade him being a piece. Who knows? And then Cup as part of the package deal. So I do believe, Nick, it would put the Giants in contention for the playoffs. And at that point, as we saw this year, if Stafford gets to the playoffs, he's a competitor in any game he's in the playoffs, at least in the NFC.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, dude, Stafford is an elevator. He's a player elevator. That's what he does, right? Like Marvin Jones Jr., like players like that. They go to Detroit when he's there and they just
Galladay.
12 touchdowns. Kenny Galladay's the best example.
Yeah.
Guys that, yeah, there's a lot. Calvin Johnson, like who's that guy right now? But seriously, like he elevates a lot of players around him. So we've already brought up Neighbors a lot. You brought up Hyatt, and I think that Hyatt, and that was a great thing to put into the conversation because is this going to be a wasted pick at this point? You traded up with
a quarterback. I still
not
don't
if we get a quarterback who can let it rip like that. And then there's also Wan'Dale, and I think Wan'Dale and whoever else the Giants bring up in this, like you're accessing, as you brought up earlier, that third level that maybe Robinson can get back to that he had when he was with Kentucky. So overall, man, I support this. It's going to come down to compensation. I'm willing to roll the dice on a 37-year-old, make things a little bit interesting, and
very interesting. I think
see if we turn this stuff around a little bit.
Look, Nick, they could be very interesting. If we take Stafford and let's say we draft like Mason Graham at 3 or Carter at 3, things get very interesting. We could have a really good defense fast, and then we have Neighbors, Stafford, maybe Cup, and pieces on offense with Andrew Thomas healthy and Illuminor. Like it is not as far away as it looks. Or you take Travis Hunter, and now
I know
shut down cornerback. No, I know you know this, but I'm saying this so that like the people listening to this podcast, like it get very interesting. The NFC is still not a set thing. Like when I'm watching the tape, Nick, like this is the one thing I want to say. The last thing I want to say about the Stafford idea. Aesthetically pleasing, yes, is what you mentioned with the film. But it could get really fun to watch because I think about it, man, like in the past, Josh Allen and Mahomes have run these kinds of offenses. But when you watch Bills tape now and Chiefs tape now, they're not doing Bills tape now. It's not what it was, dude. It's not what Stafford's doing from a processing standpoint and from a quick consistently hitting big throw standpoint. It's not anymore. They have a different offensive scheme. He can do it. He did it with Dable Allen. I'm not saying he can't. He obviously can, but it's not anymore. Mahomes, that offense isn't what it used to be from a passing standpoint. And part of that is whatever, all the things that have happened with the injuries and their offensive line is starting to deteriorate. They don't have tackle play, whatever it may be. Lamar Jackson, phenomenal quarterback. A lot of what makes him so good, Nick, and I know you agree with this and know this, is that he makes insane plays out of structure when plays break down. He makes plays in structure too, but it's not at the level when you watch. Jaden Daniels, another example. Yes, he's the best quarterback currently in the NFC. We would agree with that. But a lot of what that offense did wasn't what Stafford was doing when he drops back. Stafford's playing the quarterback position. Everything me and you have talked about for 4 fucking years on this podcast, as far as playing the quarterback position goes, the way we want to see it played, the Peyton Manning way, the Tom Brady way, that the Drew Brees way. That's what you get with Stafford. You're probably not getting that anywhere else, to be completely honest. Maybe Shedeur Sanders kind of has a version of that, but nowhere near the arm talent.
Those guys do not come available often.
No,
they do not come available often for good reason.
Yeah, he's 37. That's probably the only reason why this is happening in the contract. So we'll see what happens with this. All I know is this. We'll finish on this, Nick. According to Eric from BBI, 4 sources have come forward with this being a real thing the Giants are discussing. Multiple sources have come forward saying these trade negotiations started last year before the trade deadline. I think when there's smoke, there's fire. The neighbors, the Luminor tweets. I just feel like the Giants are definitely doing this. They're in trade conversations with the Rams. They may not pull off the trade. That could be where this thing ends. But right now, it's a possibility. And to me, Nick, as long as the compensation isn't crazy and Joe Shane doesn't get killed in the deal, I'm all for it.
I'm right there with you, man.
Last thing, actually, I want to ask you. If they do make the trade, are you out on taking a quarterback at 3, or are you still open to it?
I'm definitely open to it. Like, if they like Cam Ward enough and he falls to 3, yeah, I'm certainly open to it. Ideally, I want to help replenish this roster and get stars. Because the Giants right now, man, they who are the star? Who are the blue chips? Let's do a blue chip calibration. Blue chips on the Giants.
I would still consider it. Obviously neighbors. I would still consider Thomas and Dexter. They're not that as old as people think.
3 blue chips. And then what's the step below blue chip? Whatever people call it. I don't know. But
no, I would also put Brian Burns in there personally.
Okay. Yeah. I would agree with that. But even if he's the step below, he's still a vital player. You have guys like Drew Phillips and the newbies and these young players who you can't say are quite there yet, but you're encouraged by the starts of their career. So there are players here that you can build around, but just getting another blue chip player, like that difference maker. I want the players that coordinators on the other teams look at and they say, well, we got to find a way to beat this guy. Oh, we got to find a way to stop this guy. Like, that's who I want. The Giants have possibly 4 of them, 2 of them on the defensive line. And then you have solid, I would say rotational or solid players around them that can help enhance those players, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns. But getting a Mason Graham, getting a Hunter, getting a player like that is another one of, hey, we got to figure out how to deal with this. That's another headache for the defensive coordinator, another headache for the offensive coordinator. And you can get that at 3 while landing a quarterback. The Giants could be a competitive team. And that's what we're hoping for, man.
The NFC, things are wide open in this conference, really.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as so I'm with you. I'd be open to taking a quarterback at 3. It wouldn't be my preference at that point. If they have Stafford, I'd rather just, take one when they need it. I'm okay with the grooming idea, but I'm not head over heels on any of these quarterbacks. And stylistically speaking, a guy like Cam Ward, who's probably going to end up being my quarterback 1 in this class, most likely, is not, I don't think, exact fit for what they're going to do with Stafford. So it's like kind of changes a little bit. But look, if an opportunity presents itself, if the draft falls that way and Cam Ward's just available at 3, I would consider it for sure. Same thing with Sanders if they really like Sanders. Starting to warm up a little bit to Sanders, Nick, just from watching more. I see the vision with Sanders. I just worry about a few things with him. And then obviously beyond that, that's when it gets interesting. If they trade for Stafford, let's say, and they really upgrade the team by taking Travis Hunter at 3, or taking Mason Graham, like you said, or recouping all the picks they just got for traded for Stafford, trading with the Raiders who want Sanders or whatever at 3, picking up at 9, whoever it may be. We'll get to that later. albeit a great pass rusher or it's a defensive tackle, whatever it is at that point. Another receiver, McMillan, might be on the board at that point, who I really like in this class. And I think people are just sleeping on. I can't believe some of the rankings I've seen. I've seen him ranked like 25, 26 overall, big board. Like, I'm like, this is such an obvious top 10 play for me. It's not even remotely close. Like, I think I might end up having, I want to watch more because I've already watched a bunch of him because I liked him a lot. I think he may end up being a better version of Drake London, which should always go in the top 10, in my opinion. And Drake London has been great. He just has bad quarterback play. So I don't really get that. But anyone, and then the picks back, right? They could still, and I'd be open to it, draft a quarterback to groom behind Stafford in round 3, 4, 5. And I look at some of these guys, dude. Tyler Shuck, who I've been watching, who I like out of Louisville. I'm just going to be honest. I really like him. I know he's 26. He's been injured his whole career. He doesn't play a lot. There's processing question marks. He hasn't seen a lot of defenses, hasn't had a lot of starts. He throws a better football than almost anyone in this class, in my mind, at least. You guys can disagree with it. Go watch the tape. Like, I think you just see it. Like, I think it's pretty obvious when you watch how the ball jumps out of his hand versus basically the rest of the class on a lot of these throws and different arm angles. So he's just like a traits bet, or even like a Will Howard. Somebody who's had a lot of starts, man, just won a national title. Kyle McCord, like these types of prospects, Nick, you get round 3, 4, 5, a Jalen Milroe, if he falls. Anyone really that you believe you can develop. You don't have to do it at 3. You can still get your guy at 3, Travis Hunter, or trade down and get your guy at 9 and still get your quarterback of the future later in that process.
Yeah, I mean, the options are aplenty, and that's another exciting part about this.
If the trade happens, you're right. The options become plenty.
And if the trade doesn't happen, there's still a lot of options and a lot of paths you can take, but the quarterback becomes the priority, and that could lead to some catastrophic mistakes down the line. This, like, look, you're getting Stafford for 2 years probably, but he's 37, and Joe Schoen is well aware at this point that this is not your long-term solution. This is, if you want to use quick competitive fix usually has negative connotations, a quick competitive fix. But again, as I said, I think twice already, you have that option already, or you have that knowledge that you need to find another quarterback who can be the long-term solution, but it gives you some breathing room in finding that instead of forcing it and winding up in another Daniel Jones type of situation.
Right. It lets it come to you. The quarterback gives you the opportunity to let quarterback come to you, which you should be doing anyway, to be honest, Nick. Like, I have an issue if the Giants, like, for example, had JJ McCarthy as someone last year who they believed, oh, we can't take him. We like him, but we can't take him. And there is reason to believe they like him. They brought him for private visits. I heard his interview went really well with the Giants, like things like that. Like, there were reasons to like him, but they were like, you know what? Opportunity cost. That's our strategy. We stick to it. Neighbors is too good of a prospect to pass up on. If the same is the true of this year, Nick, and the Giants ultimately have those grades on Ward and Sanders and whoever else they believe is at the top of the class around McCarthy, or even worse than McCarthy, they're essentially just breaking their process by taking one of those guys over a Travis Hunter. It's essentially just doing what they said they wouldn't or didn't want to do last year. And then there's just so much inconsistency in their plan of attack at that point. And you're seeing that a team is broken because, you can make the case that, oh, things have changed, whatever, but it's not the reality of how you should be trying to build a roster. You have to stay true to your beliefs, and you can't just, like you've said, shop hungry. So I just think it takes that part out of the equation as well, if that's in the mix for them right now. So there's a lot that goes also, or if the quarterbacks go 1-2 and they only like those two, Nick, now they're not stuck like they were last year where they couldn't trade up for one. And they're just sitting there with their hands in their ass, and they have no quarterback veteran. They have Drew Lock on their fucking roster or whatever it would be, and no one else. And they have no other options, right? So it just takes away a lot of that. It seems risky. I get it. But I actually think there's as much, if not more, risk on the other side of this.
Yes. And again, at least you now have that quarterback, and you're going into free agency with that knowledge. The free agents know that you have that. Some may be a little bit more inclined to come to a team with Matt Stafford rather than a team with no quarterback on their roster. Right. I think the Giants want to enter free agency with a solution at quarterback. Now, is that a long-term solution? We don't know. And this is that solution. And it has been a little bit quiet. We're just hearing rumors right now, right? Because we're just in this downtime. And if where there's smoke, there's fire. There has been a little bit of smoke. I think the Stafford thing does make sense. And maybe in a week or two, whenever, actually, I would guess it would be like a month, we hear this go through and it's like, exciting. We're back. We're buying back in, baby. We're buying back in, baby. Let's go. We're not the dumpster fire anymore. We're not the New York Jets. We're the New York Giants.
And look, I'm with you on that, Nick, and I would get excited too, because there's a time, again, in my fandom, I'm sure you've been there too, where I was very not like straight with it. You build this thing the right way, you get the quarterback of the future so you can get the cap clean, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm just like, nope, there's not a lot of good quarterback play in the NFL. It's really bad. I've gone through this now for long enough, Nick, to know that like you could get more and more years of this shit. Let me just get it when I can get a chance at it. If I can get a chance at it, which is right in front of my face right now with Stafford, I want that. I want to see what it's like. I want to see what it does for the receivers. I want to see what it does for the offensive line. I want to see what it does for the running back. And then I want to see what it does for the total team, the culture. And if they're winning football games and if they're competing for playoffs, and then hopefully within the playoffs, they're making surprise wins there against teams that are on paper better than them. But Matthew Stafford makes a play big at the end of a game or something like that, which he's done before. He won a Super Bowl.
Sign me up.
Yeah. All right. We'll end it there. Thank you for listening to the Big Blue Banter podcast. More coming. A little bit of a crazy, hectic month coming up through end February here. Cover the combine and any other rumors that come about for the Giants in that period. Who knows what that will be? Maybe some pre-draft visits are starting. I believe I saw a social media post, Nick, where Shador Sanders said he has his pre-draft visit or a top 30 already planned with the Giants and the Browns. So that one might be coming soon. We might get information about that. We might not. I don't know. But I know what I'll be doing on all my downtime, including plane flights that I have coming up. It's going to be watching tape. I've watched a lot of these quarterbacks already. I'm excited to watch even more of them because it's a deep class in the sense of like there are options that look okay on tape, honestly, especially when you compare them to the supposed top 2 in the class that are supposed to look amazing on tape, that have good tape and have great moments. And I like them, but then they also have some bad tape too. That's the thing. And all these quarterbacks do. Even last year, we said that with Jaden and Drake and even Caleb, but that's part of the process. And we'll get into all of that, what we're looking for at that position and what the Giants might be looking for too. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your weekend and we'll talk to you soon.